right, yo. So today I kind of just want to talk a little bit about how Ableton's utility is probably your best friend when you're writing music and when you're mixing. And it took me a long time to realize how valuable utility is. And it took me a really long time to realize that like utility in conjunction with Ableton's mixer is probably enough to solve 99% of any mix issue that you're going to run into. Using like an EQ or a compressor or something in conjunction with it is going to be pretty much all you need. So I wanted to just dive in, and I have a couple of samples here. This first one is a stereo sample from one of Ableton's factory packs, right? Nothing too crazy. And this other one's just like a mono sample from their factory pack. So I just kind of wanted to use it as an opportunity to show you how like panning and everything works in Ableton, how to use utility to just get much cleaner mixes, and go over all the controls between basically, the volume fader, your pan slash split pan mode balance, and then utility, phase inversions, all that, to really give you an idea of like what you can use this for and how valuable it is. All right, so get into it. I think the best place to start would probably just to be like utilities controls. So if you're brand new, you got gain over here, right? And that's just basic volume control. And you're like, why would I use that, right? I have gain over here on my fader. One of the main reasons you might use it is going to be just like in between plugins, right? So if I have like a saturator, yo, what's up? It's Fluent. Today I kind of just want to talk a little bit about utility and how useful it can be for fixing your mixes, and talk a little bit about like how to read your waveforms and kind of see what's going on, so you can have a little bit more control over what's going on in your stereo image, and then also in your volumes and panning and everything. So just by the way, I have two channels here. One is a stereo sample and the other is a mono sample. And these are just basic, just like Ableton Live factory pack stuff. But I thought they did a good job kind of demonstrating like the nuances of what you can do with this. So we're just going to use it, taking a look at it. So, everyone knows about gain, right? Like you can adjust your gain up and down with this knob. Oop, let me solo this track. So you can adjust it right up and down. Nothing too crazy there. Moving on to the next thing on this side, we have our balance knob. And what the balance knob is, right, is it's going to take the audio from your right channel, if you turn it to the right, and basically steal volume from the left channel and turn up your right channel all the way until you hear only right channel, and then vice versa on the left side. So if I have it turned all the way to the left, you're only going to hear this left channel, right? So you're only going to hear this top portion right here. And remember that, because that's an important distinction. So balance knob, right, from left to right, it's not panning. It's not taking what's on the right side and putting it on the left. It's just changing the volume from what's left to what's right. We now know that we have an issue, right? So we have sound on our right channel, which in this particular instance is going to be very similar to the sound on the left. But we don't really have a way to push it over to the other side. I'll talk about a solution to that later on as we go over a little bit what's going on over here with the mixer. So one of the reasons you might want to use the gain control here is like if you have a like a plug-in chain, and let's say you have a saturator with some drive, right? Putting a utility after that, you can take a look at our mixer. Let's turn this off so you can just kind of see what levels we're hitting first. So right around like -6, right? We're like right around -6. We turn this on with 6 dB of gain, and we're like pretty much peaking at 0, right? So you can use this right here, hit -6, get those harmonics that you're adding from your saturator, but still maintain the the volume level that you're going for. So that's one use of the gain knob with utility. The other thing would be like volume automations, right? So let me just turn off my grid, hit B. Let's just say I draw some really complex volume envelope. And I'm not going to play this because it's going to be super loud. So maybe just bring it down a little bit for the sake of the video. Yeah, something like that. Let's say I have this really crazy volume automation. And that sounds amazing to me. I don't want to change it. It's like I spent 2 hours making this sound just right. You know. The worst thing you could probably do is like pretty much what I just did there, which is having to highlight all of it and change all those relative volumes, right? Because everything starts flattening out. Oh, you lift it back up and the curves quite aren't the same, and it's just kind of a big mess. Like you want to just turn everything down like 1 or 2 dB maybe. You're now freed up here on your fader to do that in the final mix. So I try to leave my faders right around 0 until that final mix, right? So that's one really good use for the gain control. Or 2 would be you got controlling volumes coming in and out of plugins or devices, or controlling volume automations throughout your mix, setting pre-levels, setting post-levels, etc. It's pretty much just a way to where you can free up this knob until the very last stage of your mix when you're doing the final volume automations or you're doing the very final leveling as you're about to do your final export. The balance knob. Okay, dude, so the balance knob and width are the 2 things that confuse everybody. But here's the sitch, right? So taking a look at it, it is what it says it is. So balance is, if you turn it towards the right, you're going to hear more of the right than you do of the left. So it's going to turn down the left and keep the right at the same volume or slightly raise it, depending on how far you go. Right? You can see we're at -3, where we were at -6 before. Okay? That's because Ableton adds 3.5 decibels as you push things to the right or the left. It's a built-in thing. It has to do with how we psychoacoustically analyze audio. Not entirely sure why. If you know why, maybe drop it down below. It does that for the right and left side, right? So it borrows a little bit of gain from the opposite end and throws it over there. So that way you perceive it as the same volume. That can create issues with like peaking and clipping and other stuff if you're not careful. So, like let's say I want to push it all the way to the right. Here we go. Once again, we got that gain knob to subtract 3 dB of gain. So if we look here, we're peaking average, right around the same volume technically. So we're not tripping up our limiters in the final mix, right? So the next control here is going to be your mute. And that's exactly what you think it is. It just mutes everything with a hit of a button. One of the cool things that you can do with it is using it to like drop audio out, but keep like reverb or delay tails going, right? So if I have like an echo, we'll just use stock echo because it illustrates the point. You can hit play. Kind of gas, low key. Might save this as a rack later. But then you just drop mute, right? So check this out. You can do like an echo out, sort of like DJ effect, without losing track volume. And you can do it immediately. And it also frees up your gain knob, once again, for more complex volume automations or, modulation with like an LFO or something. So I can now just toggle this on and off. Well, let me get a grid going. You could like toggle that on and off and then free up the rest of it for some sort of like auto pan or complex modulations. So that's another really, really helpful thing that you can do with utility. The next thing that you can do is going to be, I'll pass on the DC offset for now. I want to circle back to that because that's a little up there in terms of like what we're talking about. Yo, this is Future James editing the video. I'm here to announce that I actually did not, and when I say did not at all, remember to go over DC offset. So what DC offset is it's basically when your track becomes uncentered across the 0 point, right? So the part of 0 decibels where it crosses over and it shows the dispersion of the sound wave over time. I had a buddy who posted an Instagram story and its waveform looked all crazy, and he was like, "What's wrong with it?" The answer is DC offset. I'll post an example here. Peace. We have this mono button right here. So like the mono button, what it does is it takes the right channel and it takes, well, this is the left channel. It takes the right channel and the left channel, sums them together, creates a mono signal where it just shoots straight down the middle. So what it is it's the combination of your right and your left signal. That's it. Sorry, I had that going. Right, we can see that over here, our right and left signal are hitting the exact same time, exact same places. Over here, right, there's a little bit of difference. A little bit of difference. It's slight on this sample. It's like just a little offset on a couple things. It's not major, but it's there. So the next thing you have is bass mono. And a lot of people know what bass mono is, but they never touch this thing down here, which is your cutoff point, and they never touch your little headphones down here, right? So anytime you see the little headphones in Ableton, you can just know that it's going to allow you to solo or sample the control that you're messing with in the moment, right? So taking a look at this, I usually would recommend doing this for pretty much every track that you're trying to do bass mono, monitoring on, but check this out. So I can just barely hear that. So let's say in like a mixing context, I have something and I have transients, right? Like, so that's the loudest part of these little hits right here. Like this is the transient. That's the part that's the attack. It's the strike of the mallet on the bell in the sample. You turn this down to where you just catch that transient. It creates like a really nice effect, right? Because you're catching the meat of your transient. You're keeping it down the middle. So it's nice and articulate, and it's really coming through clean out of your headphones, out of both ears. And then the body of the sound is like nice and wide. So, you could use bass mono in that sense. To where you're just catching the transients, and it won't really make a huge difference on this particular track, but that's what I would use it for. So like for kicks, bass lines, really like big, warm, like heavy mid leads and stuff like that. Sometimes keeping more of the track mono than just 120 hertz is the solution, or less. It really just depends on the sample. So it's highly, highly, highly contextual. But what I encourage everyone to do is that if you do use bass mono, really like dial in where it is, and don't just hit it at 120 hertz. Don't just like hit it and forget it, because usually that's like, I find to be, at least in my opinion, one of the biggest issues in creating music is like you just set and forget, or you use like a preset and you just don't even think about it. There's nothing wrong with using presets, but occasionally, if you're not really paying attention to what you're doing, it can lead to a mix issue. All right, so we went over mono, went over bass mono. The next thing I would really want to talk about and like how to use it properly is going to be width. So dude, width, however you want to describe it, is a bit problematic in Ableton, just because it doesn't really tell you what it does. I mean, it kind of does. This sets the stereo width of the wet signal. 0% yields a mono signal, whereas values above 100% create a widened stereo panorama. So like, that's kind of descriptive, but it's not actually that descriptive. So what's really going on is that this width knob is similar to like what you would think of as like a balance knob over here. So if I have it set less than 100%, it's adding the left and right channels together gradually, right? It's making the left and right channel quieter and increasing the volume of their sum, right? Until it gets narrower, 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 and you perceive it as more narrow, right? So at 0%, it's 100% mono, right? So that's what that is. And then you might ask, well, what's the width do? Well, here's the thing, is that in stereo, it either is or it isn't playing out of the left and right. So like you can't make it any like wider, if that makes sense, in a way that you might think about it in your head. Like I can't send it further into the right speaker than it already is. I can only have it playing in the right speaker, playing in the left speaker, or playing in a combination of both. So if you turn it up, it keeps what's in both speakers, right? But it takes the stuff that's different in both speakers and turns it up to 100%, 200%, 300%. If I'm not mistaken, it's like 100% is 1.25 times as loud, and 400% is 2 times as loud. If I'm wrong there, correct me, but I'm pretty sure that's how this scaling works. And how is that different from mid-side mode? So mid-side mode is similar, but if you turn it to the left, it does the same thing, right? It sums your two channels together, because that's what mid is in mid-side mode. It's the same pieces that are playing in your right and your left speaker. But if you turn it up past that, it reduces the volume of what's playing in both speakers, and it raises, well, it doesn't raise, but it isolates the volume of what's playing in both speakers that are different. So remember, mid is going to be the same, the stuff that's the same on the right and left ear. Side is going to be the stuff that's different. So you get this really spectrally phased sound because it takes both channels and inverts them and then figures out what's different from each side and plays only that out of your right and your left ear. All right, so that's mid-side explained. That's probably one of the more complicated parts of this, but I swear we're going somewhere. Your input is important, right? You have this drop-down menu. I can choose to play only my left ear. And it takes the signal from your left ear and plays it straight down the middle as a mono signal. You might say, why is that important? Let's say you have a stereo sample, and it's a drum loop, and one side is bongos and one side is hi-hats, and you only want the bongos. Well, you can use this to grab only the bongos out of the sample, resample it, and then you don't have to think about those hi-hats ever again. And it puts it straight down the middle for you, so you can avoid having to like mess with the balance and the panning and all that. It's a mess, so you don't have to worry about that. So the way EQs will typically, or filters in general, will typically create a filtered sound is it'll take out frequencies by inverting them, right? So it creates like a phase cancellation effect. And sometimes, especially when talking about low end, especially bass lines to like your kick or something similar, doing that several times throughout a chain or doing that, you know, even just once can create a phase problem with another issue going on in your mix that you didn't even really have a problem with before. So the reason why you might use swap, it's going to be one of those really strange mixing situations where you're writing your song and like let's say you have a sample and you really want to use the sample, you think it sounds great, and it's in stereo, but it's really just interfering with another sample that's also in stereo. You have a couple of options on what you can do, but one of the easiest things to try first is to just swap the right and left channels, right? So like, let's say I have two drum loops. One of them has, you know, hi-hats going all over the place, and the other one has the shaker pan to the right and maybe like a tom or something on the left side. But because of the way everything's set up, it actually sounds better to have that shaker swapped with the tom. You want to keep both sides, or you have a phase issue going on between, let's say, the shaker and the right ear and another element of your mix that's panned to the right. So you can just flip them without having to invert the phase, which is what this next thing is for. So these little buttons right here will take your input and phase swap them. So what's that mean? If you don't know what phase inversion is, we zoom in on this waveform right here. It might even just be best to illustrate it. Let's see, insert new audio track, turn this to resampling, arm it. Okay, so there's gonna be a little bit of latency, as there always is. If you zoom in real close, if I drag it back just a little bit to fix the minor latency we got and maybe expand this so it's about the same size, you can see that right here, it's the exact opposite of what it was up here. And that's because I inverted our phase, right? And so what does that mean? So anything that was positive is now negative, anything that's negative is now positive. Why might you want to do that? Well, it's particularly useful when you're talking about mixing, and typically with anything that has like long tails or anything that has like a lot of bass information. So for instance, flipping your phase might be something you want to do, like we were talking about earlier. After like a filter or EQ has inverted it, you can flip it back to make it fit with your kick drum again, right? Because if your bass is not sitting in phase with your kick drum, one of them is going to get canceled out partially, and that's going to create an issue. So, using your left ear versus your right ear, you can get a lot of control here. Select exactly what you need in order to get everything how you want it to be. And last little trick that I would want to go over is talking about panning. And that's kind of the whole reason I had this mono sample up this whole time, was to just talk about how panning worked. And I turned the balance. It sounds like it's coming out of my right ear. It feels like it's coming out of my right ear, but it's actually playing out of both speakers, but just slightly louder out of the right versus out of the left, right? But it's playing out of both. That's really important because if we have a situation, right, where we have a stereo sample and we want to get both sounds over to the left side or over to the right side, the best way to be able to do that is really going to be here in your mixer. You have to click on the balance knob and hit select split stereo pan mode. This is going to be your left channel, right? So that's, let me open this back up. This control, right, is going to be for your left channel, which is the one that's on top, always. This is going to be what's for your right channel. So now, if I wanted to, I could take the right channel and put it to the left. So now both sounds are playing completely out of the left, okay? Or you could swap them. But what really makes this like a useful effect is going to be controlling where and how wide things sound, right? Because we already went over that the mid-side width control is sort of useful for certain situations, and the width control here is also sort of useful, right? Like it might turn down your side information, it balances it, but it's not really good at like placing it. And that was a big thing that I had a lot of issues with when I first started mixing and like writing music, was finding a way to like really, fit everything in the mix without putting it all to just mono. Because you could stick stuff in mono, and mono stuff is super easy to pan. It's super easy to like distinguish where it is. But when you have something stereo, I was always struggling with like the control. So like in this particular situation, I would use a combination of like bass mono, the width control, and everything to get my levels right in the context of a mix between what's loud on the outside versus what's loud on the inside. Okay, and then once you have that set, you can use split stereo pan mode to, like I said, either push everything to one end and a little bit on the other, which I guess would kind of just be balance, right? Or having a symmetrical push towards the middle. So I could take the right end and push it just a little bit towards the middle, and then let's say the left end has completely different information going on, and I want to pan it slightly more in towards the middle. Now I have more control over where things are sitting than I did before. And you might say like, oh, how important is that really? Well, in the context of like an entire mix, it can really help you isolate where to place every individual sound so that it has a unique spot, and so it really shines through and breathes. Yeah, and then, utilizing this even further, another thing you can do is you can take your utilities, right? Duplicate a chain, right? So I have a chain going. You got your left channel here. Just call this my right channel, right? Rename them to keep it easy to remember what's going on. Okay, cool. So now I can independently change each channel and add additional stereo information. So like if you want to add some really crazy stuff, you could add an echo on your left channel, and I don't know, we'll just do like a convolution reverb or something on our right channel. Might take a second. Max for live. There we go. Okay, cool. So now it's going to sound like absolutely nuts. I had it on the wrong thing. Here we go. And I can solo. Gotta do this. Whoops. You gotta make sure that if you pull the right and the left channel, you have to pan them hard left, hard right if you really want to have that effect. Or you gotta balance them to create another spot in the mix, right? So you got a built-in split stereo pan, right? And then you can add more to your built-in split stereo pan. So I could add another echo, just, I don't know, more stereo information, right? Just add as much as possible here. And then now I have the control to go here and adjust it again, or, you know, add another utility, continue this effects extravaganza, and I have complete control over where everything sits. I have complete control over what's right, what's left. That's pretty much the spiel I wanted to go on today, was to just talk about how effective utility is as a tool in live, and how I just think it's so overlooked as a producer, especially when you're first getting started, because it's so boring. I mean, you look at it and you're like, oh, like, you know, it's a volume knob, whatever. I don't really understand what any of this other stuff does, so who cares about it? I got a pan knob on my I got a pan knob on my mixer. Who cares, right? But you know, learning to use it effectively is really gonna level up your production skill. So that's why I wanted to talk about it as one of my first videos, was to just really dive into it and say like, hey, it's useful. Check it out. So anyway, if you enjoyed the video, subscribe. I'm gonna try to come out with content pretty regularly, hopefully at least once a week. And we're just gonna talk about audio and how to better use the tools built in Ableton to just be better producers. Hope you all have a good one. Peace.